Okay, so this is the Bible study for Exodus chapter 3, verses 1 through 15. And it says, Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over there and see this strange sight, why this bush does not burn up. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. The Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I'm concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of the land that is into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. And now the cry of the Israelites has reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now go, I'm sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God said, I will be with you, and this will be a sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. Moses said to God, Suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, The God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they ask, What is his name? Then what shall I tell them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, Say to the Israelites, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever, the name you shall call me from generation to generation. All right. So remember that you can download PDF copies at www.abqnaz.org/alive and follow along with us as we answer the questions and read the questions and answer them from the text. Number one says, what happened in last week's Bible study? A, Moses killed an Egyptian who was beating a Hebrew. That's true. B, Moses broke up a fight between the two, should be two TWO, Hebrews, and they knew about what he did. That's true. C, Pharaoh wanted to kill Moses, so he fled. That's true. D, Moses stuck up for 7 daughters of a Midianite priest who were trying to water their father's flock. That's true. E, Moses married one of the daughters. Yes, that's true. F, God heard the cries of Israel, remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and looked with favor on Israel. That's true. And so this is the continuation of that story. Number 2, what happened in 3:1 through 3? A, Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law. Yes, that's true. B, he led them to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. Yes, that's true. C, the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush, and that's true. D, Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up, and went over to see why, and that's true. And so God got Moses's attention with a bush that was on fire but didn't burn up. It just kept perpetually burning, which is not what usually happens. They usually burn up and then there's nothing left to burn, and the fire moves on or something, or the fire goes out if it has nothing left to burn. Number 3, what happened when God called Moses from within the bush? A, Moses answered, "Here I am." I want to just say that in scripture, and particularly in the Old Testament scripture, this is this response seems to be the right response to God. If God is calling to you, he's calling out to you, it's "Here I am." And that doesn't mean, I mean, he was calling. It doesn't just mean that I'm here. It's kind of like, um, I called my kids from the other room. And by the way, usually when I do that, when I call from the living room or the kitchen to get the attention of my kids, and I say, Ethan or Brennan, most of the time I hear nothing in return, and I'm not even sure that they heard me till I go in and say, "Hey, I was calling you," and they say, "Yes, I know." And I say, "Did you answer?" "Well, you didn't keep talking." It was that kind of thing. But I remember, and sometimes this is the conversation too, but I remember my mom, if she called me, what was not the right answer? The right answer was to get up from what I was doing, to come downstairs to where she was and present myself to her, available for her to speak with. And that is the "Here I am" response that I think we're looking at. So it's not enough to be wherever you are doing whatever you are and just say, what God, what do you want? But to bring yourself to God and present yourself to him and respond, "Here I am." Now he has your attention. Now he's able to speak with you. And by the way, it's handy when our kids do that too. Because most of our conversations need to be had face to face, not shouting down the hallway. But us parents feel like we shouldn't have to be the one to walk all the way down the hallway sometimes. We're the ones in public areas having family social time, not hiding in our rooms, right? So anyway, don't show that part of the video to my kids. Number 3, what happened when God called to, I've already read this part, this is what I was teaching. Moses answered, "Here I am." B, God told him not to come any closer and to take off his sandals, for the place where he was standing is holy ground. So now I know that this, in the very beginning of this text, calls Mount Horeb the mountain of God. This is happening on Horeb, the mountain of God. But we got to remember that Exodus is believed to have been written by Moses, probably not like at the beginning of his life or as it was happening like a journal, but rather at the end of his life, when he is writing down the important information to prepare Israel for their future and to remind them of what they've been through. Therefore, since his mission was to go get the Israelites and bring them back, and he says in this text, and I know I'm jumping up ahead a little bit, but he says that the proof that I am who I said I am, and that you're supposed to do this, is that you're going to worship me on this mountain. And so when they come back, the mountain gains significance because it becomes the place where they worship God. And so writing this in retrospect, after this has become the mountain of God. Now, I don't know, perhaps this was already known to be a place where God appeared or there were spiritual things happening, but this was kind of out in the middle of nowhere. So I don't know who it would have been known to, perhaps the Midianites. But it just seems like it seems like this this becomes the mountain of God, and it becomes significant in Israel's history. And Moses is writing this in retrospect saying, the mountain of God, you know, the mountain of God, the one we came to worship on. That's where this burning bush experience happened at the first. You know, was it the mountain of God back then before all this happened on it? Or did it become the mountain of God because of how God appeared to Moses here and how they came back to worship him there? And I think it's more likely that it became the mountain of God. And he's speaking about it in the past, and calling it the thing that they all now know it is. But God tells them, why is it the mountain? Well, God says this is holy ground. This ground is different. There's something about this place where I meet with you right now, where I'm going to meet with you in the future. And I think as humans, we struggle with this concept because we go back and forth between giving too much significance to a place and not paying any attention at all to a place. And here's what I mean by that. If we give too much significance to the church facility, and we've given a lot of significance to the church facility. We've called the worship center, we've called it sanctuary. We've made sure nobody walks in with hats on. We've done all sorts in our church history. We've done all sorts of things like this and given a lot of significance to that. And that's not necessarily bad, but in the long run, if we won't curse in the church, for instance, but as soon as we walk out the door, we curse like a sailor, then was that really what God intended for us to? Is that really the understanding of God's purpose that he intended for us to have? That place was so holy and we were in the presence of God there, but wherever else we are is not a big deal, so we can do whatever we want and act however we want. Is that what he intended? Well, no, he didn't. So then we realize that if a place becoming special causes us to treat that place with respect, as if that was the only place where God is, and then not treat God with respect because we act like he doesn't exist outside of that place, when we leave that place, we don't treat him with respect, then we've misunderstood God's purpose. And unfortunately, that's the way a lot of people do with churches and cathedrals and these sanctuaries. Now, on the other hand, there are places of significance in our relationship with God. There are places where we have prayed and communed with God and gotten to know God. And to be flippant about those and act like those places don't matter is the opposite thing. And so there's a sense of awe and respect. So for instance, in the Church of the Nazarene, we have a tradition that involves the altars. We believe you can pray anywhere. You can pray at home. You can pray in your car. You can kneel at your seat in the church if you want. You can pray wherever you want. You can pray eyes open, eyes closed. You can pray wherever you are and whatever position you're in. But many people have come to an altar of prayer, and our altars are usually at the front, and we call people forward to respond to the message that God has given, that might be bringing conviction, or to respond to the call of God. And there are people that have knelt at the altars and made big decisions for God, and that matters. And if you think about meeting God at an altar and then seeing later a child scoot across the altar on their nose, and sort of treat it with disrespect. And I know children don't mean to do that, but then you would understand how, like, that's where I met God. that's where I know for some reason I can go and meet God anywhere, but there's some special conversations that we have when we go there. And so a good balance in understanding this. And so the Old Testament, I think, has a greater emphasis um, on reverence for the place where we meet God than probably Jesus would have us have in the New Testament, when he's talking to the Samaritans and they say, well, the Jews, she says, the Jews think we should worship down there, but the Samaritans worship up here. And Jesus says there's going to be a day when none of that's going to matter. The place is not going to matter, but the true worshipers will worship him in spirit and in truth. So that's what ends up mattering in the New Testament. But I don't think that that means that we shouldn't have any reverence for places where we meet God. And I think we should have more reverence probably than we generally do. C says God identified himself as the God of Moses's ancestors, which was very important in a world where most people groups were polytheistic and believed in many gods. And so the question wasn't just, okay, so this is God, which God, who's God, what things do we attribute to this God? Now we know today and understand that there is one God. He's the only God. He has made himself known in such a way that that many cultures have known there was a God, even if they didn't know who he was. And I love the description of Paul in Athens and how he handles the altar to the unknown God. But God is saying, I'm the God that spoke with your ancestors. We have a history. We have a history of talking. And now I'm talking to you. D, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. So as soon as he knew who he was speaking with, he knew enough about who God was and the instructions that had been given that he had that reverence for God himself and did not want to look at him. Number 4, what was God's message to Moses in verses 7 through 10? A, I have indeed seen the misery of my people, heard them crying out. Yes. B, I have come to rescue them and bring them up out of the land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And as I was reading this, God says, I have come down to lead them out. And I'm thinking, yes, God has come. Yes. And then God says to Moses, so now go, I'm sending you. No, wait. If I was Moses, that's what I'd be saying. No, wait. God, I thought you were coming down to go. And he says, no, I'm coming down to talk to you. Make sure that somebody knows that I care about what's going on, and you take my love and care for my people there to tell them about it. I'm sending you. And still today, God does this. He expresses his heart to somebody that's willing to listen, and then he calls them to go make it happen, go do the thing that God wants to do in this situation, hear his heart, and then follow through on the actions that heart drives. And so he's sending Moses. So number 5 says, how does Moses respond? Of course, he said, yes, Lord, whatever you say, here I am, send me. But he doesn't say that. He says, who am I? I'm not the person. Who am I to go? What am I going to tell them if I go? I don't have any authority. I don't have any sway. And then he says, suppose I go, who should I say sent me? Who are you? So there's 2 questions that Moses asks here that I think is significant. He first says, who am I? Then he says, who are you? And let me just say that the second one's more important than the first, And if we understand the answer to the second one, then the first one is answered also. There's a song out on the radio, Christian radio right now, but I think it says, "Hello, my name is Child of the One True King." And the whole song lyrics and verse are about, who does the devil try to convince us we are, and who do we think we are, and who do we believe, and then at what point do we realize that we are a child of God. And so who we are is most importantly defined in the context of who he is. And so that's the more important question. To know who he is means that if he is who he says he is, then he's calling us and empowering and going with us. And so that defines who we are. And these are significant questions. They're not small questions that Moses asks. And by the way, for anybody feeling a call to ministry, or and we usually say that when we mean pastoral ministry, because we all have a call to ministry as children of God. But for anybody who's searching what God's call is on your life and what his plan is for you, a lot of times we start with the question, who am I? And then we get to, who are you? And we really should have started with, who are you? And then we would know the answer to the question, who am I? Because the only thing that's really important when we talk about the call of God is, who is he, not who am I? What does he want to do through me, and is he able? Number 7, number 6, I'm sorry. How did God respond when Moses said, who am I? A, I will be with you. That's important. And then B, I will give you a sign. After you do what I tell you, you will come back here and worship me. So number 7 says, is this the kind of sign you want? No, I want the sign before I go to make sure I know that I'm not going to be a fool. I want the sign now so that I know that you're going to be there. But God is calling Moses to respond in faith. And on the backside, he will know that it was God who was with him and brought him through, because this is going to be the outcome. You will be here worshiping on this mountain. You're not going to die. You're not going to fail. The people of God will come out with you, and you'll be here worshiping on this mountain. But this is not the kind of sign we like. We want something to be clarified and defined and a sure thing beforehand, or else we don't like to go usually. And then the second part says, what if this is the kind of sign God offers you? Will you obey anyway? And this really, your answer to this question says more about your faith than any other question. Will you go if God offers you the sign that you can't see until afterwards, until after you've obeyed? 8, who did God say that he was? He said, I'm the God of your fathers. He had already said that, but then it says in verse 14, God said to Moses, I am who I am. Now, from one perspective, I have to believe, my mom, if I'd have said something like that to my mom, she would have said, you're a smart aleck. So God says, he says, who do I say sent me? I am who I am. That almost sounds like, don't you worry about it. Don't worry about who I am. I just am. That's all you need to know. But it's kind of says something about what God wants us to understand about him, that he eternally is. There is no other one who is. He is. He's the only one. and there is none like him, and so there's no way to define him from our perspective. He is defined by himself. He is, I am who I am. That's who he is. Is God, is God's eternal existence, his self-identification as faithful in the past, and his promised faithfulness, that shouldn't say sin, it should say in his promised faithfulness in the future, enough for us. So that's what he's really defining when he says, I am who I am, or I am that I am. Is he's faithful. He's been faithful. He's promised to be faithful. He just is. Is that enough? And it has to be. And let me just say, if it's not, none of us will follow him in the call that he has on our life. We won't be like Moses and step out to follow him. It has to be enough, because that's how the call often comes.